Hi, my name is KD. Thank you for joining the part 2 of the session on OCI events service. If you have not seen the part 1 of this session, I encourage you to do that. In part 1, we looked at what events are and what OCI event service is and why do we need it. Uh, and we also looked at an overview of the OCI event service and the key features of this service as well. In this session, I'm going to dive deeper into the core constructs within the OCI event service. These are the events themselves, and then there are rules and actions. We will dive deeper into these concepts. And we will look into the IAM policies that you need to use. So essentially, we're going to get into the how of how the OCI event service works. And we are going to look at the metrics that this service provides. We are going to look at some of the common use cases for this service in conjunction with some of the other services that it works well with, including the streaming service, the function service, and notification service. And then we are going to look at some reference examples, architectures of these use cases, followed by an actual demo towards the end. So let's get started. This is all covered in part 1, so I'm going to skip these first few slides and start with a brief summary, right, of essentially, an event is something that has happened. Each event is a fact, which is indisputable and immutable. Once it has happened, you can't really change it. And the event describes a state change that occurred to the entity. Uh, and the events can be user-initiated CRUD operations, something getting created or deleted, etc. These, in the context of OCI event service, these could be events related to resource lifecycle state changes and also some system-level events in OCI. All these events are automatically flowing into the OCI event service, and the service checks them to see if they match any user created rules. Rules are the second key concept. So you filter against those rules, and if the event matches a rule, the user defined action is triggered, and action is the third key concept here. Uh, and if there is a rule match, an action is triggered. If there is no rule match, then the events are dropped from the context of the OCI event service in this case. Uh, and each event itself is based on the open source uh, cloud events standard, which is part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Uh, it's a project there, and they have a open source standard that we follow for the OCI event service. And in part 1, I went into detail on why that is important. But each event itself uses JSON objects to represent these interesting things that have happened. So let's actually look at an example event, right? And events all have the same set of top level attributes, which are known as the event envelope. There are things like the event type, the versioning, which version is being followed, the source of the event, the OCI resource that generated the event in this case. There is a unique event ID. There is a timestamp. And then some metadata as well. And then there is the payload of the event. And the payload appears within the data attribute that you see towards the bottom. Uh, the information in this field is important because this is where you isolate one event from other or distinguish different events, and you can write filter against the data in this payload, and these filters are essentially what the rules are that we will look at next, and based on these rules, you take specific action. So this uh, the information in this data field depends on the service which produced the event and the event type which has been requested. So useful information there. Uh, Okay, so now let's look at rules. An event rule is a user-defined filter on one or more field values within an event. We looked at the data payload, so you can write filters against it, and based on the rule matching, user-defined actions are invoked. Rules can have more or one or more than one actions defined to execute when they are triggered. Uh, Rules filter all incoming events, and based on the rule definition, decide which action to uh, take on that event. So, there is the rules themselves, they apply to events in the compartment in which you create them, and any child compartments as well. You should create a rule in the compartment with the resource you want to, which has the resource you want to monitor, and then you have to specify where to deliver the matching events. So let's look at an example. Let's say you have a compartment called IT compartment, which has some resources that you're interested in, and there are some events related to those sources that you want to uh, write rules on and then take actions on. So you would write a rule that filters for, let's say, autonomous data warehouse backup events. Uh, and you can say when the backup event starts, you want to filter on that rule and take an action, which can be a notification. And when the backup ends, you want to filter, write a rule that filters on that event and then send another notification. So you would write this rule within the IT compartment. You can write it in the root compartment as well, but in this case, you can also write it in the IT department where the resource actually lies. Uh, and Events does not actually have any requirements on the location of the action resources. So you could specify when you want to take an action in the rule, you can specify a topic in the operations compartment, a completely different compartment, as where you want to deliver any matching events and take those actions. You obviously need to specify the right IAM policies with proper permissions to be able to write rules and for the event service to deliver these events to the action resources. Another important thing here is the use of tags. With events, you can use tags to target resources. You target resources by adding the tag to a filter in a rule. A filter tag helps you in automation by targeting only the resources that contain a particular tag. So, for example, let's say that you have lots of resources related to a particular service. Let's say you have several database instances in your OCI tenancy, but there are only a few that are the critical ones, and you can tag all of these as the operations with the operations tag. And then, in the OCI event service, when you write a rule, you can trigger a particular action for resources that only contain this operations tag. So you don't have to. So it just gives you additional level of flexibility in writing your rules in the event service. The maximum number of rules a user can create in this tenancy, the default limit is 50, but you can request a service limit increase in this case. Uh, as we discussed, rules also specify an action to trigger when the filter finds a matching events. Actions essentially are responses you define for event matches. You can have multiple actions per rule. There is a defined set of actions that customers can choose from to execute. Uh, and these actions can be invoked using three services right now, which is the trigger functions using the functions OCI functions service. You can publish notifications using the OCI notification service, and you can output the event to a stream in the OCI streaming service. So six services right now as the time at the time of this recording that generate events that OCI's event service uh, can handle. These are the compute service, database service, networking. There is block storage, object storage, and notification service. And you write rules and take actions. The action resources can belong to the function service, the notification service, and the streaming service. All right, so let's look at the IAM policies that you need to work with events. The first set of policies, there are two distinct types. The first one is uh, to have IAM policies for the event service itself. To create rules, you must authorize the event service to deliver event messages to action resources, which can be any combination of topics, streams, or functions. So there are three kinds of policies that you see here uh, that enable the delivery of these messages. And then the second set of IAM policies is for users. And These set of policies lets users that are not administrators to work with the rules. Uh, and These users must be authorized to manage or read the rules, and this list shows the different types of IAM policies that you would need for the users to take to be able to do different things with the OCI event service. For example, if you want to allow users in the DevOps group to create rules that triggered action resources, you must write a corresponding IAM policy that allows them to manage these rules. Uh, in terms of the metrics, the events, OCI event service emits metrics on how many events are published, how many are matched, and how many events were successfully routed to corresponding actions. And you can view these metrics in the telemetry dashboards in the OCI console, and they give you nice, rich graphical views into how your rules are behaving. In terms of OCI event service guarantees, there are a few things to notice here that might impact how you use this service. Uh, if an event is actually ingested, the service guarantees that it will be evaluated at least once against the rules that you have written to filter against it. And if the filter matches or the rule is matched, the OCI event service is going to guarantee at least one delivery attempt for all the actions that you have specified as part of the rules. Remember, you can have more than one action per rule. Uh, but there are no guarantees of delivering in order, or the processing to happen in order. So you should design and write uh, any glue logic or code accordingly. And if the action target or targets are not responsive, the service will retry the delivery for up to 5 hours, or there is an error called non-tryable error. If that occurs, then it will not try anymore. Uh, and there are service metrics that we discussed a little bit earlier that are generated, so you will get a failure metric as part of that. Uh, those service metrics for OCI events. Let me wrap this session here. In the next session, we are going to look at some of the common use cases that you can execute with the OCI events service, and we'll look at some reference architectures for these patterns, and then I'm going to show you a demo of the OCI event service in action. Thank you, and I look forward to having you join part 3 of this session.